and we answered to them, and he lost a lot of soldiers.
There is an unwritten rule of war. If you are fighting only against your enemy's frontline troops, you cannot win that war. True victory begins when you destroy the lifelines that sustain those troops, the factories that produce their weapons, and the platforms that launch those missiles deep within the enemy's own territory. For a long time, the Kremlin believed this was a special military operation that would be confined to neighboring territories, while life within its own borders would continue as usual. But the rules of the game have completely changed. Now the map has been turned upside down. Today on our table are raw intelligence reports detailing the massive strategic strikes, delivered with surgical precision, that have been successively aimed at Russia's military, industrial, and economic nervous system over the past 72 hours. In this episode, we'll dissect how Ukraine moved beyond a defensive posture to paralyze a superpower's war machine from within. We'll shed light on everything from Russia's most critical oil transit points to its steel mills, from its espionage networks in the Black Sea to how the spring offensive on the front lines was shattered in just 3 days. In a moment, we'll examine in detail how these successive strikes have opened irreparable gaps in Moscow's war economy. If you're ready, we're diving into the strategic map rewritten in the shadow of missiles. We begin our analysis with the energy lines that are the war's true fuel. If you want to stop a war machine, you must drain its bank accounts. The Kremlin's bank account, however, is hydrocarbons. Ukrainian intelligence is targeting this very source directly. In Novorossiysk, one of Russia's most critical oil transit points, a massive drone operation was carried out. Novorossiysk is not just an ordinary port city on the map. It is Russia's largest and most strategic trade and oil export gateway on the Black Sea. Striking this massive terminal, through which millions of barrels of oil are pumped into global markets daily, does not merely signify physical damage to infrastructure. It is a very clear message to international insurance companies, ship owners, and oil traders. Russia's ports are no longer safe. Declaring a port unreliable means skyrocketing freight rates and insurance premiums, and consequently, massive cuts to the Kremlin's oil revenues. However, the operations were not limited to the southern Black Sea coast. Simultaneously, we witnessed a wave extending deeper into Russia's north and interior regions. Ukrainian drones severely crippled Russian fuel infrastructure at the Primorsk port and the Kstovo oil refinery. The refinery in Kstovo is one of Russia's largest and most modern fuel processing facilities. It is a key source of the high-octane diesel and motor fuel required by tanks, armored vehicles, and logistics trucks on the front lines. Striking these facilities directly chokes the logistics chain along the front lines. Due to Western sanctions, repairing the damaged compressors, cracked distillation columns, and burning reactors at these massive refineries in the short term is nearly impossible because the necessary spare parts cannot be procured. Independent sources are now confirming firsthand how this situation has led to a catastrophe in Russia's domestic market. According to the latest reports, Russia is now facing a severe nationwide shortage of natural gas motor fuel. The fact that a country where oil gushes from its own soil cannot supply fuel to its domestic market because its refineries have been struck is the most concrete proof that the war strategy has failed. While the Kremlin has redirected all production capacity to the military apparatus, the country's logistics and civilian transportation network has ground to a halt. Now let's turn our map to the sea, to the Black Sea and Azov Sea basins. We have previously analyzed on numerous occasions how Ukraine, despite having virtually no navy, has managed to trap the Russian Black Sea fleet in its own ports. However, now even the interiors of those ports are no longer safe. Ukraine carried out a precision strike against the Russian caliber missile warship Admiral Grigorovich, which was anchored in the port, inflicting heavy damage. The Admiral Grigorovich is no ordinary patrol ship. This vessel has served as the launch platform for those deadly caliber cruise missiles that have been striking Ukraine's energy infrastructure, civilian settlements, and power plants for months. The fact that this strategic platform, worth billions of rubles, was struck in its own port, where it was believed to be best protected, once again demonstrates the helplessness of Russian air defense systems against asymmetric drone and missile tactics. This is not merely a military loss. It is an irreparable blow to the prestige of the Russian Navy. However, the struggle for supremacy in the Black Sea is not limited to ships. Intelligence and surveillance networks are the invisible swords of modern warfare. Ukrainian special forces carried out a shock operation on a captured natural gas platform that Russia had been using as a spy hub in the Black Sea for years. Known formerly as the Boyko Towers, these platforms were used by Russia not only for gas extraction, but also to monitor the entire northern Black Sea through state-of-the-art radar systems, signal jammers, and electronic warfare stations installed on them. Striking this platform means blinding Russia's eyes over the sea. When Russia's early warning systems collapse, it creates an opportunity for Ukraine's unmanned surface vehicles, USVs, and missiles to penetrate deeper. We have already begun to see the consequences of this blindness, even in the Azov Sea, which Russia considers its inland sea. As a result of another unmanned aerial vehicle operation in the Sea of Azov, a massive cargo ship providing logistical support to the Russian military was sunk. Russian officials and the TASS news agency were forced to officially confirm casualties in the attack on this sunken cargo ship. Cargo ships disguised as civilian or commercial vessels are frequently used as covert logistics routes, particularly in the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, to transport ammunition, military equipment, and fuel to the front lines for the Russian military. The fact that these ships can be sunk even in a closed basin like the Sea of Azov, allegedly under complete Russian control, demonstrates the alarming level Ukraine's long-range asymmetric strike capabilities have reached. If you take your enemy's weapon away, you win that day's battle. But if you shut down the factory producing those weapons, you win the war. The Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, is putting this strategy into practice on the battlefield. The target is no longer just fuel depots, it's the heart of heavy industry. Ukraine's SBU drones paralyzed the most critical and strategically vital steel supplier for Russian tank production by striking it directly. A modern tank, such as a T-90M, is not merely a pile of iron. It requires extremely specific, high-strength steel alloys for its armor, gun barrel, and engine block. The facilities producing these alloys are located deep within the country, in the Ural Mountains or central Russia. The SBU's long-range kamikaze drones are targeting these foundries, blast furnaces, and rolling mills directly. When steel supply stops, tank assembly lines grind to a halt. When tank production lines stop, new armored vehicles cannot replace those lost on the front lines. This is a chokehold on the military-industrial complex. As noted in the analysis published yesterday by Charter 97, these strategic paralysis operations are fundamentally shaking the balance on the front lines. This is very good news for Ukraine and a turning point that will deeply affect the course of the war. However, attacks on industrial centers were not limited to steel. The requirements of modern warfare are also deeply tied to the chemical industry. Massive chemical facilities are required for the production of explosives, rocket fuel, specialty polymers, and gunpowder. Early this morning, unmanned aerial vehicles carried out a heavy operation against a facility in the Voronezh region, one of Russia's largest chemical production centers. Voronezh is relatively close to the Ukrainian border, but is a massive logistics and industrial hub. An explosion or production shutdown at such chemical facilities would cause disruptions in the supply chain for gunpowder and explosives at munitions factories that could last for months. You may have an artillery piece, but if you have no propellant to put inside the shell, that artillery piece is just a pile of metal. As we observe this systematic campaign of destruction, it becomes much easier to understand why Russian military leadership is resorting to increasingly desperate tactics. Because when equipment stops coming from the factories, the only resource left to deploy to the battlefield is the human body. Throughout history, Russian military doctrine has tended to compensate for technological deficiencies with numerical superiority, that is, massive waves of soldiers. As the supply of armored vehicles slowed due to steel mills struck by the SBU, the Russian command poured tens of thousands of untrained soldiers onto the front lines for the massive spring offensive they had been preparing for months. The aim was to overwhelm Ukrainian defensive lines with a mass of infantry in the absence of mechanized units. However, things on the ground did not go as planned on the Kremlin's maps. Ukrainian forces virtually crushed Russia's massive spring offensive, wiping out the enemy's entire week's worth of conscript intake in just 3 days. Consider the mathematical weight of this statement. Russia is spending an enormous budget nationwide, making promises and sometimes applying pressure to recruit thousands of new personnel into the system every week. However, modern combat tactics on the front lines, cluster munitions, FPV drones, precision artillery fire, and rugged defensive lines are grinding these rookie units down at an incredible pace. Consuming a week's worth of manpower in just 3 days is an unsustainable rate of consumption. When an army's regeneration, its ability to replenish itself, falls below the rate of losses on the battlefield, the collapse of the front line is a mathematical certainty. Although the Kremlin is trying to hide these losses from the local population, the increase in civilian cemeteries and leaks on social media prove just how horrific the cost of this meat grinder tactic is. At this point, analyses suggesting that Russia has missed its chance are now being voiced much more loudly. According to independent analysts, Russia's opportunity to secure a strategic advantage on the battlefield has now completely slipped away, and the initiative has shifted. The primary reason for this missed opportunity is that Ukraine has not merely remained in a defensive position, but has transformed into an asymmetric technological powerhouse. The topic I will discuss shortly serves as proof not only of how this war is reshaping the global defense industry, but also of how the future of that industry is being redefined. War does not merely destroy nations, it also propels innovation to an unimaginable pace. 3 years ago, Ukraine, which was dependent on Soviet-era weapons, has today, amidst the ring of fire, virtually rebuilt its defense industry from scratch. The only way to survive against the enemy's massive numerical superiority was to leap several generations ahead in technology. And they succeeded. Newly released strategic defense reports prove that this transformation has now reached global proportions. By achieving the capacity to detect and neutralize over 900 air threats per day, Ukraine is emerging as one of the world's leading exporters of security and defense technology. 900 air threats per day. Cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, kamikaze drones, electronic warfare assets. No peacetime army in the world possesses such a testing ground. Even Europe's leading armies test their air defense systems only in simulations or limited exercises. Ukraine, however, is coding, developing, and perfecting these systems every night in real time under the world's heaviest barrage of missiles. This development will completely reshape the post-war European security architecture. In the near future, European capitals seeking to protect their borders will import AI-powered anti-drone and early warning networks, tested in the field with blood, directly from Ukraine, rather than relying on cumbersome systems costing billions of dollars. A country that once sought security guarantees is now on the path to becoming the continent's security guarantor. Let's summarize. Spy platforms and warships sunk in the waters of the Black Sea. Industrial facilities stretching from Voronezh to Kostovo, now reduced to ashes. Assault waves melting away on the front lines within 3 days, and defense networks transforming into a technological shield. All of this screams a single truth at us. The dynamics of the war have completely slipped out of Moscow's control. The borders, strategic depths, and economic strongholds that the Kremlin once regarded as red lines no longer enjoy any inviolability. No matter how large a country's army may be, if the refineries that fuel that army are burning, the steel mills producing those tanks have ground to a halt, and the security of the people behind that army cannot be guaranteed, collapse is merely a matter of time. To understand how geopolitical fault lines are fracturing, and how the realities on the front lines are tearing through the fog of propaganda, we must read these details. Here at MrGEOPOL, we will continue to provide this deep strategic analysis. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and like the video to stay updated on developments, anticipate the next move on the global chessboard, and become part of this unique analytical network. Your feedback is invaluable to us. Please be sure to mention in the comments how you found the analysis. I'm Charlie. Never stop seeking the truth. Stay safe and always try to see the bigger picture. See you in the next episode.